After nearly 4 years of full-scale war, both Ukraine and Russia faces enormous problems. Cause the war of attrition has exposed deep structural problems for both sides. And in Ukraine, the Ukrainian army is under constant pressure, and the problems in the Ukrainian army increase even further in the last few months. But unlike Moscow, which often suppresses criticism and silences dissent, Kiev has chosen a different part. Because Ukraine's new defense minister Mykhailo Fedorov is just 34 years old and is pushing a radical and unusually open reform agenda. For example, Federov speaks clearly about the problems within the Ukrainian armed forces, and he speaks critically about many commanders in the Ukrainian armed forces. And this is a crucial step for Ukraine, because only who recognizes problems can solve problems. So today we want to take a closer look at the new defense minister of Ukraine, Mykhailo Fedorov. Why is he expressing the problems within the Ukrainian armed forces, and why is this such a crucial move for Ukraine? Well, we try to figure that out in that video. Hi, my name is Alexander Kortan. I'm a media manager and strategic analyst from Austria, and I'm also the founder of the German YouTube channel Geopol. And when you watch my German videos, you know exactly that I often speak about the strategic problems of the Russian Federation. And Russia, that is for sure, has a lot of problems. Because the Russian military suffers heavy losses every day while making almost no territorial gains. Meanwhile, the economic situation in Moscow is also worsening, and Putin faces the risk of a financial collapse. And also in the international and global stage, Russia faces enormous pressure and loses many strategic allies, such as Venezuela or maybe the mullahs in Iran. But I already talked about all of these Russian problems, and you find many videos on the English channel as well. But today we have to talk about different problems, because we have to talk about the problems for Ukraine, because also Ukraine is under enormous pressure after 4 years of war. So, for example, many Ukrainian cities, just like the capital Kiev, have been left without heating and electricity for several days now. And the local reconstruction is not easy, because Russia keeps attacking energy facilities. But also the Ukrainian army is under immense pressure on the front lines. And even though for pro-Ukrainian viewers it's difficult to hear about Ukrainian problems, we have to face these problems, because only when we face these problems we can try to solve it. But to evaluate Ukraine's military situation properly, it is important to acknowledge the progress made over the past decade, because until 2014 the Ukrainian military was outdated, ineffective and deeply corrupt. Its leadership and tactics were little more than a stripped-down version of the Soviet army. And also modern equipment was not really with the Ukrainian armed forces. So the Ukrainian army between the 1990s and 2014 were just a small Soviet army with old equipment and old teaching soldiers. So reforming and strengthening the Ukrainian armed forces has been one of the most significant achievements over the past 10 years. And for a country that is neighboring a state that uses terror as a policy like Russia, defense capabilities are crucial for survival. So since 2014, Ukraine's army has likely undergone the most profound transformation in its modern history, both in quantity and quality. And this is really exceptional, because Ukraine had big problems before 2014. And they not only had the wrong soldiers and old Soviet doctrines, but they also had less and less equipment since the 1990s. Because Ukrainian material was insufficient for a large-scale war. Because in the 1990s Kiev not only gave up nuclear weapons, but also scrapped thousands of tanks and hundreds of combat aircrafts. And under the 1992 Conventional Armed Forces in Europe Treaty, Ukraine had to reduce its military holdings drastically. So from over 9,000 tanks there were only just 5,000 left, and also 434 military aircrafts were destroyed. So we see that Ukraine can withstand the Russian aggression in the year of 2022, and 4 years on it's a big achievement when we look where the Ukrainian armed forces came from. But while significant progress was made, and that's for sure, some problems within the military armed forces are still here today. Because modern NATO standards and strategies have not reached all commanders, and especially older leaders trained under Soviet doctrines still rely on outdated tactics that ignore losses, and in some units soldiers are effectively sacrificed. And there is also a culture of Soviet-style misinformation, so commanders speak about victories that never happened, and they don't talk about losses that already happened as well. And such incompetence contributed to Russian gains like the summer advance near Dobropolya and the breakthrough north of Pokrovsk, which occurred because local commanders failed to report setbacks and accurately relay battlefield conditions. And even the chief commander of Ukraine is criticized for his Soviet thinking. Because Alexander Syrsky, so my sources from Ukraine, is a big fan of micromanagement, and many sources say that he wants to command every single soldier personally. But of course, all these types of old commanders reduce combat effectiveness and also the morale. And that's a reason why since February 2022 at least 200,000 Ukrainian soldiers have left the battlefield, according to a member of the Verkhovna Rada, twice the official number reported by Ukraine's General Prosecutor's Office. And most of these deserters are newly recruited people in the year of 2024 and 2025. So Ukraine for sure have a problem with deserters. We have to say Russia has the same problem as well, and it's not really a big surprise, because after 4 years of a war of attrition, it's completely normal and logical that there are some problems within the armed forces and that there is an increasing number of deserters. And we also have to say that 200,000 deserters in 4 years is not the brink of a collapse for the Ukrainian armed forces. So it's definitely not good for Ukraine, but a soon collapse is not on its way in the Ukrainian armed forces. But if these problems won't be addressed, they could escalate, and they could in the future lead to an escalation and to a collapse of the Ukrainian armed forces. So it's important there is one specific guy who comes into play right now, and this is the new Minister of Defense, Mykhailo Fedorov. Because Fedorov has openly addressed the army's problems himself. He said, "I don't want to be a populist, I want to be realist. The ministry I inherited has a 300 billion deficit, 2 million Ukrainians awaiting mobilization and 200,000 soldiers leaving the units voluntarily." But not just that, Mykhailo Fedorov also criticized local commanders and old Soviet-thinking commanders as well. And he said, if Ukrainian armed forces want to be successful, there has to be a new culture in the command situation, a culture of trust and without lies. So Fedorov is quoted again, "We cannot fight with new technologies while holding on to old organizational structure." And Fedorov himself is here to implement modern technology into the Ukrainian armed forces, because he is famous to be a big fan of the increasing numbers of Ukrainian drones on the battlefield, and he wants to increase this situation further. And drones are extremely important for the Ukrainian armed forces, because the massive use of Ukrainian drones could lead to a specific scenario, a scenario where Ukrainian losses decrease and Russian losses further increase, and that this could work we already saw in the year of 2025. Because in 2025 alone, drone deployment reportedly reduced Ukrainian losses by 13%, while Russian losses increased. And Fedorov understands that implementing modern tactics require not only technology, but also modern structures and forward-thinking commanders. And exactly this could make him to the most important person in the whole war of Ukraine. Because we see in Ukraine criticism and new people and modern thinking is encouraged and is welcomed, and that is not the case in Russia, let me tell you that. Because critical commanders, even when they were highly competent, were dismissed in the Russian army and later taken to court. The best example for that is General Popov. General Popov held off the Ukrainian summer offensive in the year 2023 and was highly capable general. But because he was critical of the way of war Russia goes, and because the lack of logistics, he was dismissed and later sentenced to prison because of corruption. So we see, while in Ukraine a 34-year-old hotshot takes over the Ministry of Defense and wants to make things better than in the past, Russia gets stuck in its old Soviet thinking. And in a war of attrition, this could be a decisive factor, because if Mykhailo Fedorov is successful in his policies, he could increase the Russian losses and decrease the Ukrainian losses. And exactly that is what matters in a war of attrition. So Mykhailo Fedorov could be the most important person in the Ukrainian war. But let me know what you think about Mykhailo Fedorov and his policies, and let me know, do you think will he be successful? Let me know in the comments, I will enjoy reading them. Otherwise I will end the video here. Thank you all for watching, take care, and I'll see you in the next one.